Imagine yourself here, in this precise moment, not in a postcard, not in some romantic illustration hanging in a drawing room. Imagine yourself standing in London in 1870, a city alive, pulsing, demanding, a city that never truly slowed down. Your pupils adjust to the gray, murky light that filters between buildings of red brick. The streets are narrow, so narrow that two horse-drawn carts passing in opposite directions means one must press against the wall. The brick buildings rise on both sides, blocking natural light, imprisoning sounds in urban canyons. Above, the sky is an indeterminate gray, neither cloud nor full clarity, just an opaque blur. The first thing you feel is the air. Not just air, a mixture. Coal smoke permeates everything, creating a permanent halo. Mist curls between buildings like a living entity. Coal dust clings to your mucous membranes. Steam emerges from various directions, from factory chimneys, from steam pipes, even from blacksmith shops. All together it creates an almost tactile quality to the air you breathe. And the smell. Oh, the smell. This is perhaps what we least prepare people for. Coal smoke is the base. Upon it, stratified layers of other odors. Horse manure, fresh and aged, covering the streets in a brown layer. Markets nearby where fresh meat and decomposing vegetables share the same space. Inadequate sewage systems. Yes, there is a specific smell to human waste that is not properly processed. Sweat from workers. Machine oil, burning tobacco, spilled beer. All of it mixing, creating something that never truly dissipates. By 1870, London had achieved a status that no city before it had ever reached. More than 3 million people lived here. It was not the number itself that was impressive. It was what that meant structurally. No one truly knew how to manage a population like this. The infrastructure was not planned. It was continuous improvisation. People arrived constantly, from rural villages where agriculture was being mechanized, making workers redundant, from other countries, Irish fleeing famine, Germans, Italians, Jews from Russian territories. London accepted them because it needed their arms, not because it was prepared to accommodate them. Entire neighborhoods were built in absurdly short periods. Picture this. In 1850, an area was open field. In 1865, it was a neighborhood. Builders used the same designs repeatedly, not for elegance, but for pure efficiency. Rows of terraced houses stretched for blocks, so identical on the outside that even residents confused which was their own home. Black doors numbered, identical windows, roofs at identical angles, urban mass production 300 years before we knew the term. Durability? Not a priority. Speed was. These houses were built to be occupied immediately, not admired 100 years hence. Most were constructed expecting to be repaired, altered, or even demolished over time. Permanence was not guaranteed. Brick. There was a reason it was so omnipresent. Not because it was beautiful. There were practical properties. Brick resists fire better than wood. It could be produced en masse and was relatively cheap. It could be assembled quickly, but the quality varied wildly. Some bricks were carefully fired in well-controlled kilns, durable, resistant. Others went directly into hurried work, and within 2 or 3 decades they were already deteriorating, cracking, absorbing moisture. Mortar mixtures were inconsistent. Standards were loose. Foundations were too shallow by our modern standards. Many houses simply rested on compacted soil, not on deep footings. It was not negligence. It was tradition. It was cost. It was urgency. Inside these buildings, life followed patterns. The rooms were narrow but tall, ceilings reaching 3.5 meters, perhaps more. This was not luxury. High ceilings improved ventilation and helped manage heat and smoke. It was pure functionality. Fireplaces were essential, not decorative. Coal burned constantly during the colder months. Even humble homes usually had at least one hearth, because without it, winter was dangerous. People gathered around the fire not just for warmth, but because it was the heart of the house. But the walls were thin. So thin that you heard practically everything. Your neighbor next door arguing with his wife? You knew. Your coworker coughing at night? You heard it. A baby crying? Clear as day. Floors creaked. Privacy as we understand it today simply did not exist. You did not just live near your neighbors. You experienced their lives through sound, smell, and routine. Arguments, laughter, illness, and work leaked through walls as if there were no barriers. Now let us talk about the horses. Because London was the horses. Miles of streets were dominated by animal traction. Horses pulled carts, horse-drawn buses that carried passengers, delivery wagons, private carriages. They moved people, goods, and materials from early morning until night. There were tens of thousands of them in the city at any given moment, and each horse produced a substantial amount of waste, daily, tons of it. Managing this waste became one of the greatest logistical challenges of the city. Entire industries, collections of occupations, existed solely to remove manure from the streets. Street sweepers, haulers, waste collectors. It was constant work, always lost. The streets were not cleaned in the morning and kept that way. They were cleaned, and an hour later they were dirty again. On rainy days, this transformed into mud. On dry days, into dust that rose with every step and wheel. Transportation was pure chaos. The cobblestones amplified sound. Iron-rimmed wheels ground constantly against them with a noise that accumulated in decibels along the street. Vendors shouted to be heard above this buzz. Horses whinnied, startled by things. Accidents were frequent, carts colliding, people falling under wheels, horses frightening and bolting. The city did not flow smoothly. It advanced through friction, repetition, and constant noise. If you went from one point in the city to another, it took hours. The roads were permanently congested. There was no traffic signaling as we know it, just chaotic negotiation. Who moved forward depended more on assertiveness than rules. Above all this, smoke. London depended entirely on coal. It was the battery of Victorian civilization. Homes burned it for heat, factories burned it for power, trains burned it for locomotion. Coal fed warmth, industry, progress, but it also coated the city in soot. Buildings darkened over time. White stone became black. Clothes absorbed dirt within hours. People cleaned constantly. Clothes, homes, faces, and still felt dirty. The dirt was so fundamental that bathing more than once a week was considered suspicious, possibly dangerous to health. Fogs in London were not merely weather. They were pure chemistry. Moist air from the Atlantic and the Thames mixed with coal smoke to create dense, yellowish mists known as pea supers. Visibility could drop to literally just a few feet. People became lost in streets they knew well. Traffic slowed or stopped completely. Crime increased. Thieves operated practically with impunity in this artificial darkness. These fogs could last for days, sometimes a week. People adapted because there was no alternative. You put a cloth over your nose and mouth and carried on. Gas lamps illuminated the streets after dark, extending hours of work and social activity. Night became part of the urban schedule. London no longer rested when the sun disappeared. Time itself stretched. Days became longer. Sleep shortened. People worked, shopped, socialized, all under artificial light that created an artificial day. Water controlled survival. The River Thames was London's artery. Goods arrived by boat. Trade flowed through the docks, but the river was also a dumping ground. For much of the century, sewage flowed directly into it. Drinking water was frequently drawn from sections of the river situated downstream from sewage outlets. The consequences were catastrophic. Cholera devastated neighborhoods. Thousands died, sometimes hundreds in a single week from a single district. The connection between contaminated water and disease was debated fiercely. Doctors were divided. Scientists disagreed. Politicians hesitated. Progress did not come quietly. It came through disaster, investigation, and public rage. Eventually, London built one of the most ambitious sewer systems in the world. Massive underground tunnels that redirected waste away from the river. Most residents never saw them. They were invisible, but they transformed the city. One of London's greatest achievements was invisible. But here's the thing, and it is worth slowing down for a moment. Even with photographs, maps, letters, newspapers, police records, and engineering reports, we still do not have certainty. No one alive today walked those streets in 1870. No one can confirm exactly how mornings sounded, how unbearable summer nights were, or which smells people eventually stopped noticing. What we have are fragments, evidence, educated reconstructions. Everything you are hearing here is based on what historians believe is most likely, not absolute truth. And that is not weakness. It is intellectual honesty. Victorian London was not a single experience. It was millions of overlapping lives. People worked long hours. Factory schedules were rigid. Workshops filled entire neighborhoods. Child labor was common and widely accepted. Families depended on every income. Rent consumed much of what people earned. Overcrowding was severe. Multiple families often shared a single house, sometimes a single room. And yet the city was not without joy. Markets buzzed with conversation. Music halls offered escape. Pubs functioned as social anchors. Street life created community. People laughed, argued, celebrated, and mourned together. Even in hardship, social life persisted. Respectability mattered deeply. Clothing signaled class instantaneously. Appearance could determine opportunity. Even the poorest tried to look respectable. Because respectability offered protection, dignity, and sometimes survival, religion existed alongside doubt. Faith competed with science. It was an age of invention and anxiety. Railways collapsed distance. Telegraphs collapsed time. Cities grew faster than people could emotionally adapt. What makes Victorian London so compelling is how modern it feels. People worried about pollution, housing shortages, public health, crime, and technology changing life too quickly. These conversations sound familiar because they are. The same fears, the same hopes, the same tension between progress and human cost. What feels alien is the physical intensity of the city. Everything was closer, louder, dirtier. Life happened face to face, without distance or filters. So when you walk through this reconstruction, when you allow your mind to imagine these streets, remember, this is not a final answer. It is an informed invitation to imagine responsibly, to understand how cities actually functioned, to recognize how much of our modern world was shaped here in this chaotic, dirty, vibrant, impossible, and deeply human place. Because history is not just something we read on pages. Sometimes it is something we walk through.